Hello and welcome. Today we've got Sean O'Hara, who's a clinical psychologist. And today we are going to be discussing gold and Bitcoin versus the deep state psychopaths. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin for all my daily newsreels. Sean, thank you so much for joining me. How are you and what have you been up to?
Hey, good morning, Nick. It's great to see you. It's kind of bright behind me. I've got the vernal equinox shining in on us here in Southern California, but I'm doing great. We're going to have a lot of fun today. My friends, my colleagues in media psychology, we've just been having a blast since about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And all I can say is today we're going to talk about psychopaths and the mental health problems that are going on all over the place. And we're going to have a bloodbath today. How's that?
Bloodbath. I know the deep state really took that and turned it into their own, thing, to discredit President Trump for actually calling bloodbath in the sense that the economy is going to shit.
Yeah. Well, Nick, think of what he did. We were talking about this in the office. We've never seen anybody play the media, the mainstream propaganda media, like a fiddle, the way Trump does. What did he do? He placed bloodbath at a Texas rally. And then for the next 24, 48, 72 hours, the media went on blitz. All the hacks came out just railing on him, political hacks. All these people came out and railed on him, and they just spewed all this hate. And then after that settled down, what did he do? He played back the past 8 years of the horrendous things that people on the left and some of the progressives and certainly Democrats and even some of the rhinos have said, which have been 1,000 times worse, which has completely invoked violence, completely invoked and threatened populations and groups. So again, and also one other thing, we've talked about propaganda. We watched the news really a lot for like 3 weeks after that. They deployed, get this, Nick, they deployed every single form of propaganda technique that you could possibly have. Ad hominem, bandwagon, beautiful people, cult of personality, dictate, straw man, cognitive dissonance. Reductio ad Hitlerum. I mean, they use that one on him all the time. Pincy's unique, misinformation, disinformation, and 100 more. They just went to town. And again, we've always talked about how desperate we're going to see the media become, the mainstream propaganda media and politicians that will come out. And they are really proving to be desperate, on defense, completely on defense, because they can't control the narrative. So what are we hearing? Censorship, censorship, censorship. So here it is. All the things we talked about before, it is playing out like a fiddle. So
yeah, you mentioned obviously, that the title of this video is Gold and Bitcoin versus Deep State. Where you wanted to speak about psychopaths today, which of course is the Deep State. So what is exactly how are you going to tie in the gold and the Bitcoin in this?
Well, in the office, we talk as psychologists who we're seeing coming in, and people right now, ever since COVID, are coming in. We're seeing an unbelievable spike since COVID on mental health illness, anxiety disorders, depression, drug and alcohol abuse, people committing suicide. I've done more 5150s in the past 3 or 4 years than I've done in the 10 years that have come before it. People are suffering from tremendous mental health problems. And we've been evaluating, why are people coming in with these mental health problems? And there are two things. It's two-tiered. One, it could be micro, just in their individual life, they have a divorce or a kid is sick, or just something very personal that's in their micro world, which is just kind of about them. And then there's the macro. There's the world outside of ourselves, our government, our financial systems, the world, wars, things like that going on that are out of people's control, but still impact them terribly in their mental health. And what we're seeing now is all this mental health spike has been because of COVID. and all the media fear. Remember, we talked about all the fears that have been injected into people. And now currently it's the financial system and the problems with the financial system. And people like, will my kids be able to get a good education? Will my kids be able to make a living? Will we be able to make a living? Will we lose our house? Many people in the country are losing their cars, losing their houses, going into default on credit cards. So this is the cause of most of the mental health problems that are showing up in our offices, not exclusively, but a great portion of them. So we're looking at this and going, you know what? Our government, our poorly run financial system, our criminal financial system is at the root of a lot of the mental illness that people are suffering. So what it comes down to is we're going to talk about this is we have a financial system that doesn't work and a polluted government that the money goes through, and that's affecting the normal functioning of people in this country, plus the many other things, wars going on, people coming into the country more than the country can absorb. And we'll hit on that in a couple of minutes. And also another thing that's causing people tremendous anxiety is, well, the idea of free will. Free will is kind of gone in the world. No one can actually go out and do anything and not have some kind of consequence one way or the other. But now what we see happening, and this is where there's a lot of problems, is people are, the powers that be, deep state, is now encroaching on people's personal freedom, their personal privacy, their personal rights. And this too is scaring people. They're wanting to put people on a total controlled money system and take away their privilege to have money or use money the way they want to. These are things unprecedented in what we've ever seen in our society, before. So again, how does this lead into it? We could have a solid money system that's fair and equal and not based on this central banking system, which we've been born into and enslaved into. And yet we don't. And the reason we don't is because powers that be don't let that happen. Because why? They'll lose control. And that's what a lot of this comes down to. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And many people get that. If not, people are waking up to it in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I know you've got a presentation that you'd like to share to the viewers today. So why don't you show us?
Sure. What do we bring it up here? Let's see. Share screen. See if I can do this. Is that coming up for everybody?
Yes, there we go.
Okay. Well, what I want to do is just, I want to talk about real quick about what is psychopathy, what is psychopaths, and just give a list so people are aware of this. And then I'm going to look at the real quick 20th century so people can see how that is formed. Psychopaths can be an individual person or it could be a group of people. It can be just criminals that are doing some criminal white collar or blue collar crimes. It could be, some street gang or, crime organization like that. Or we can look through the 20th century and we can see psychopaths can take over governments, and psychopaths always surround themselves with other psychopaths and other sociopaths and malignant narcissists. And this has long been documented. It's what I talk on a lot. And it's just people need to be aware of this. So they're really seeing things for what they are. So here's just a quick list to go through with your guests. And that is a psychopath or psychopathy is antisocial behavior, people who lie, cheat, and steal. Gee, have we seen that recently? I don't know. What do you think? They're conning, they're manipulative. They can be predatory. They're not always predatory, but they often are. Predatory behaviors. They can be sadistic, cruel, and have premeditated, deceptive behaviors, always for their own gains or for their own agenda. These people or groups or organizations are callous, unemotional, superficial, shallow. They attract and associate with other psychopaths. And the only thing that differentiates psychopaths and sociopaths and their minions or sycophants is there's a dominant There's like the alpha, and then there's a submissive. There's the beta or the follower there. And so the dominants always can manipulate in some way, the submissive, have some dirt on them, have, bad pictures on them, have, their corruption and money in some way, and they hold that over their head and get them to do their bidding. These people lack empathy, remorse, guilt. They lack conscience. They're incapable of accepting responsibility for their behavior or actions, and they always blame other people or other things, wars, other people, other political parties. They always blame other things other than taking responsibility. Their narcissism makes it impossible for them to accept responsibility. When they get together in power, and I'm going to give some quick examples of this. When they get together in power, they become very bold. When there's a whole bunch of them, they control a company or a government or a regime or an organized crime group. They're disinhibited, egotistical. They have full narcissistic traits. They desire the domination and control or exploitation of others, especially when they are in power or feel like they're above the law or untouchable. This is where they don't care. It's like, we're going to do what we want, and if we provoke you, tough, just deal with it. They often will express superficial charm. They pretend to be for the people and for the good, but they're really only interested in their own goals and their own gains and their own greed. And a couple more things: these people are reckless. Their decision-making judgment is very poor, is very rash. Sometimes it's very methodical. I think we're seeing a lot of methodical stuff going on right now, but it can be very impulsive. But we're also seeing a lot of impulsive moves being made in our today's world. And these endanger others or society, and they fail to consider the long-term consequences of their actions. And again, above all, they can be arrogant, entitled, indifferent to the needs or realities of others. So that's, this isn't rocket science. Anybody listening can look this up and understand this. Let me put it into some context. Let's just look at the 20th century. Look at Pol Pot in the killing fields in the Khmer Rouge. He was just an incredible psychopath. He thought he was right in doing what he was doing, but it was all the generals or the people around him. He had a whole slew of psychopaths around him, and they okayed what they did. We saw it too with Joseph Stalin. When Lenin had a heart attack and there was like a power struggle to overtake him, Stalin had a bunch of people around him and they just grabbed power. It was a total power grab. Same with Chairman Mao. If you look at the people around him and the other ministers around him, same thing. If you see, Saddam Hussein, Idi Amin, just look at the people, look these people up, look at who they had them around them. Psychopaths, dominants, betas, bad things. Oh, and the cornucopia, Adolf Hitler. Just look at the cabinet of people Hitler had around him. Goebbels, Himmler, Goering, Stryker. He had the greatest collection of psychopaths, sadists that you could imagine around him. So it's important that we look. This is just the 20th century too, Nick. We could do a historical, analytical, psychiatric look at Ivan the Terrible and Genghis Khan and just dozens of people pre-20th century. And you know what? You'll see the same thing. Behavior never lies. Psychopathy, psychopaths never lie. They do what they do. We've had them in the past, we've had them in the recent past, and we have them in the present, and we'll have them in the future. The important thing is identify who these people are and the power moves that they're doing, because they're dangerous. That's what it comes down to. So with that, I want to just kind of go over some of the current things, again, back to the mental health problems that we're seeing in the United States and around the world, especially Western countries, that we're seeing right now. And I want to ask a couple, what kind of thinking questions? Here we go. What kind of thinking does a government have to allow a propaganda media to come out every day and lie incessantly to its people, to mislead, to use deceit, to literally do mental and psychiatric damage to a person by constantly lying to them. What kind of government, bureaucracy, leadership not only allows that, but fuels it, feeds into it? I mean, think about this. This should blow everybody's heads off when they think about it. 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, Janet Yellen came on. Here we are in the United States, $35 trillion in debt. And here goes back to the money thing and people worried about money and their security and their families and all of that. Janet Yellen came out and she was interviewed on one of the propaganda stations. And she goes, well, we have enough money to fund 2 wars, Hamas and Ukraine. When we saw this in our office, we literally, our heads blew up. We just couldn't believe that this individual, who is way past her abilities, in my personal opinion, is suggesting that we can fund 2 wars. Think about it. 2 wars. What type of thinking and mentality? Who are the people behind her instructing her to say this kind of stuff? There's one example. Again, we have this central banking system, and this is really the root of all evil. If you pull all up ropes up in the sand, it'll always go back to this. We're born into a slavery in this country. It's called the central bank. It's been here since 1913. And without any of our choices, without any of our decisions, we are forced. Our government forces us and subjects us to be at the mercy of a system that cheats us every single day out of our hard work, out of our savings, out of our money. And there's almost nothing that we can do about it. And we could do something about it. We could be on a silver standard and a gold standard and maybe Bitcoin or some of these other funds, which can't be manipulated and don't go through the hands of our politicians. Because it's long been, many philosophers and intellectuals said, look, when money goes through the hands of government and politicians, you have enslavement and control and corruption. And that's been, we're seeing that today. So we're forced to be on this money system that none of us have chosen. It's being inflicted on us. And it's ruinous to people's well-being. And once again, going back to mental health, this is the root of so many people's fears, causing them depression, anxiety, drug and alcohol abuse, having to go to hospital. People have given up and taken their lives. Younger people are doing all these little videos saying, these wonderful 25, 30-year-old kids, a lot of girls coming on going, look, I'm living with my parents. I got a degree. I'd have to work 10 years to be able to afford a house, maybe, or something that's of value. So we're being forced to live under a system, Nick, that doesn't work. And people are finally waking up to this. And it's our own government, our own leaders, our own bureaucracy that is pushing this on us. Here's a couple more examples, and then we can banter on it. We currently have people in the U.S. and in your country as well pouring into the U.S. Tens of millions of people, which guess what? Our country can't properly absorb. We can't properly absorb that. What mentality, what thinking, what judgment? Who's making these very ill-fated decisions to let people pour into the country that we can't even take care of? They're leaving poverty in their own countries to come live in poverty in ours. We already have a massive drug problem of fentanyl and homelessness. And all these millions of people pouring in have 3 options. One, we can find dutiful employment in a $35 trillion debt economy, or they can go on the government assistance, or they'll have to find making a living under other means. This is almost a humanitarian crisis as well as it is anything else. Who's making these decisions? Who's deciding, Nick, it's okay to let this happen in any country? They're leaving, again, poverty in their own country to come live in poverty in ours. We'll run out of hotel rooms and shelters that we can set up. And then what? When another 5 or 10 million people come in, and it's unfair to them, and it's unfair to the people in this country. Two other big examples where we're seeing our government make decisions, and people need to think, what's the thinking behind this? What mentality? What ideology? What personality types? What thinking leads our government to make these decisions? And one is, since when have we seen an American government persecute its tax-paying citizens? Think about it. When has this come up before? They're calling citizens of this country, just because they don't agree with their ideology, domestic terrorists, white supremacists, MAGA terrorists, all this other stuff. When the media and politicians blast on the media that this group of people are racist and all this other stuff, that really they're not. What they're doing is they're demoralizing that level of population, and they're making it okay to disenfranchise them, illegitimize them, and destroy them. We saw this where? Oh, Nazi Germany, when they decided, German Jews who were citizens of that country were immoral and thieves and all the bankers and all this other stuff. And they made it okay to put them in concentration camps and kill them, murder them by the millions. We always say, get this, Nick, we always say, oh, never again. We can never let that happen again. Well, that's BS. It can happen again. It will happen again unless we do something about it. What we've heard, I heard Tulsi Gabbard, who's, I think, fantastic. She got up and said really brave things. Dr. Phil was on Joe Rogan, and he was saying really brave things. You say brave things. Your guests come on, say brave things. Dr. Phil came on Joe Rogan. He said, and Dr. Phil always slows down when he wants to make a point. He goes, there's thousands of Chinese citizens or Chinese immigrants coming into America that are male and of military age. Here's Dr. Phil just really driving a message home. What is the decision making behind doing this? Or is there some ulterior motive? Couple more things. When did we start persecuting our people again in this country, our political candidates, and throwing just abusing and mistreating the laws in this country, stripping people of their Bill of Rights, their amendments, and abusing the law to persecute a political candidate? Beyond belief, persecute someone. And it wouldn't matter if it were Trump or anyone else. The fact it's happening is the problem. That's the mental problem in that. Well, what country manipulates in a horrible way its population to take a vaccine that maybe they don't want to take, which in many cases has turned out to be sketchy? I won't go down that rabbit hole, but you can make your own deductions. So again, we could have a very different life system in America and around the world if we had honest money, if we had an honest money system instead of all the waste and all the control. Why do they want to keep a central bank? Elizabeth Warren came on and was debasing Bitcoin, saying it was the money of criminals and all this other stuff. And then she had some guy came on and they go, oh, but a central bank digital currency, we can do great things with that. That's just honest money and whatever. And there it is, just the biggest, hook and lie that you could possibly have. So again, why do they want to do that? So they can rule, so they can dominate, so they can control, and so they can enslave. And right now, we have a global order, not the 1%, it's the 1/1,000,000th of 1%, Nick, that have decided that they get to rule the rest of the planet and decide what every country, every government, everybody is to do. It's on a massive level. And they own all the industrial complexes, military, media, food, right down the line,
Mm.
and in a position to do this on a grand scale. So there's your thoughts for the day after what we see in the office,
Yeah, excellent presentation. Thank you. What I don't understand, and a lot of people would ask the same question, and some of us here, we have the possible answers as to this question. But why do you believe that if these people know they're going to die, why are they doing this? Why are they wanting to dominate if they know their life is going to come to an end? What's in it for them?
Which people?
Well, the deep state.
Well, deep state, if you look at deep state, it has legacy. This is a family tradition. This is groups of families that have evolved over the years, from the richest bankers to big government people to monarchies. They've been in control. This is a legacy thing. This one millionth of 1% that are in the power control of all this stuff. This is a legacy thing. They think they're doing right, just like literally Hitler thought he was doing right, getting rid of Jews and having a pure Aryan race or whatever. They think this is like, to save humanity and that the earth survives and overpopulation.
I mean, I'm not saying, I think what Hitler done is a very terrible thing, but we have to also remember at the same time that we were told everything we have been told about Hitler is in it's in a world where the deep state controls. And if we know they control the school system, and in history class at school, they teach you about Hitler being this terrible, terrible, terrible person, it contradicts, because the deep state, they write history. So, I don't know. I'm a bit suspect with that area.
Yeah, well, you should be. There's a whole story behind that. They're rewriting history. Every civilization that's fallen back to Alexander the Great, they've rewritten history in many ways to suit what they want the current population and the population moving forward to think and believe. And where do you start with that? Children. That's where you begin that. And, it makes me think of a couple of really important quotes. Edmund Burke, the Irish philosopher back in the 17th or 18th century, he said, the greater the power, the greater the dangerousness of the abuse. Think about it. The greater the power, the greater the dangerousness of the abuse. Yeah. And then, of course, what we're seeing right now all over the world is what Goebbels said years ago. Goebbels was insane and a psychopath, but he was highly intelligent. He said, it will always remain one of the great jokes about democracy. And that is, it gave its deadly enemies the means by which to destroy it. And that's exactly what we are seeing happening right now.
Some may argue, Sean, that these people, the reason why they, the deep state, the reason why they want to dominate the world is because they can reincarnate and keep living lives. And that's what some people have reported. What do you think about that claim?
Well, right now they are working on technology to be able to take someone's brain and scan it into a chip, literally, because our brains work on neural nodes. And so do nano chips. They work on rapidly moving through information to get to the answers much quicker than our brains can. And they're working on literally scanning brains into a chip. That way, if they can sustain the body or sustain the body's life and then somehow program the chip back into a new brain, well, that person could go on their thinking, maybe in a different form or different body. And we already see a lot of things that Elon is working on. There's a lot of great literature on this. I don't know if I can name names of people on here, but there's a lot of research on this. We're not there yet, but we will be one day. There's no doubt about it. So I think deep state and these people believe that eventually they're going to will evolve to this point where that will be a reality. It isn't right
Yeah.
now. It's all super, sci-fi and stuff like that. But eventually we'll get there. Just like we're on the brink of AI right now. And if you think propaganda has been bad now, just wait.
So just like they can scan your brain into a chip, could they can they move your soul into a different body?
Well, that's the one thing that more literature has been written on than any other subject is the soul and spirituality and really what constitutes that. Psychopaths, they don't have souls, so I don't know what they're going to try to, move around. But the point is that if they can switch the brain, if we eventually get that point, a chip can hold a previous life's brain and then get transferred into another, perhaps included in that thinking could be spirituality of some sort, whatever that person possessed or maybe didn't possess. These are big questions. I won't live to see that, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now, yeah, people very may well, or we will. It's just,
Yeah, very interesting. Well, Sean O'Hara, thank you very much for sharing everything with us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
What I always say, go to the library, do real research, be very discriminant on what information you take into your precious brain. Look at the realities versus what you're being told. And in there, you're going to find truth. And that's something we're in short supply of today. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Sean, and we'll speak again very soon. You take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nick. You too. Bye-bye.